This is what keeps the world turning today. Purchase some enjoyment. The problem is that this imperative is empty, because enjoyment is, by definition, what remains forever without an equivalent. It is radically impossible to purchase enjoyment. At the most, we can pay for the packing of a simple image or simulacrum of enjoyment. Understand by packing the endlessly replaceable surroundings of an aborted attempt at enjoyment. This essential lack around which the transaction is made obviously induces a second kind of nihilism, which is not the same as the nihilism in its leftist version. We are reminded here of the admirable play written by Jean-Marie Coltès, Dans la solitude des champs de coton, in the solitude of the cotton fields. In this play, we see that instead of the enjoyment, we have an endless transaction concerning its supposed content. Finally, in wanting to sell packings for which there is no other veritable use except to throw them out, we transform the world into litter, into a pile of trash. The packing of false enjoyment is, by essence, rubbish. We might just mention that one form of ecology consists essentially in wishing that the detritus of the aborted purchased enjoyment be biodegradable. Enjoyment, then, even aborted, would be earthly and natural by the fact of its packing being non-polluting. Perhaps ecology, this form of ecology, is only a reformism of the nothing, a rectified nihilism, or if you want, a soft nihilism. The unconnected conception of existence comes down to turning oneself into the waste of the world. And the generalized mercantile conception comes down to turning the world into waste. In both cases, under the sin of enjoyment. We might then say that classical philosophy was right to leave enjoyment aside. We have, in fact, today better arguments than the ancient Greeks to associate philosophy and asceticism. And yet the most interesting course is probably not that of the restoration of ascetic wisdom. Rather, enjoyment must be conceived otherwise, within philosophy. We must redefine and rehabilitate enjoyment rather than re-establishing antique asceticism. This is precisely the challenge that Jean-Luc Nancy took up by proposing an assertive thinking of enjoyment. I am referring to an article of 1986, the title of which is L'amour en éclat. L'amour en éclat. was for me absolutely impossible to translate, but Avital Ronel, which is here, has translated. And what? How? You can say how you translate L'amour en éclat.
The title was translated as Shattered Love.
Shattered Love, yes. It was an idea, a great idea. I agree with Avital Ronel about that sort of translation. And in this text, Jean-Luc Nancy treats the question, what do we mean by enjoying? And this article is built on three essential propositions. First proposition, double negation. I quote Jean-Luc Nancy. Sexual enjoyment is no more impossible, as Lacan maintained, than it is possible, as sexologists maintain. End of quotation. This means that the two dominant conceptions of sexual enjoyment, finally both the rightist conception and the leftist conception, must be dismissed. Sexual enjoyment neither requires death or the end of all connections, nor can it be purchased. So, neither Lacan nor sexologist. But finally, neither leftist nihilism nor rightist nihilism. It's the first proposition. Second proposition of Jean-Luc Nancy, it's a definition. After the double negation, a definition. A definition, sexual enjoyment, I quote, is traversing being as other. Being as other. It involves the touching of being itself. The touching of being itself, but being itself as other. And this definition authorizes the play on the words joy, the joy of the other in being, and enjoy, traverse for joy. So, a definition of sexual enjoyment as something which is a touching of being, but a touching of being as other. And first, a third proposition, it's something like an ontology of the offering. I quote, sexual enjoyment is an extremity of presence. An extremity of presence. Self-exposed, of self-enjoying outside of self. Self-enjoying outside of self. In a presence that no present can absorb. A presence that no present can absorb, and which is not represented, but which offers itself incessantly. And so the attempt of Jean-Luc Nancy is clear, asserting that sexual enjoyment is neither narcissistic nor oblatory, nor pure relation to self, nor pure devotion to the other. Sexual enjoyment is in a relation to self outside of self. It is the exposition of self outside of self. It is not theater, a representation, but a pure presentation. And offering, exposition are two words fundamental for Jean-Luc Nancy.